Safety planning isn't about fear. It's actually about foresight. So if you've ever considered leaving your abusive partner, or maybe you already have, this video is for you. I'm J20, a licensed psychotherapist, and I have over 10 years of helping people heal from unhealthy relationships. So when you start your journey as a DV advocate, or working in the domestic violence field, it becomes very obvious early on that safety is priority. A lot of that is because, as I've discussed and will continue to discuss, once a person starts losing power and control over their partner, the violence tends to increase or escalate. So, safety is huge. When a person is in an unhealthy relationship, essentially they're unsafe. So, it becomes something that needs to be done intentionally. And I usually don't use need statements or should statements. When you're client centered, survivor centered, you really want people to have the freedom of choice, the autonomy. But one thing I do like about making these videos is this is not a session, even though I'm still staying survivor centered, but some of the language is a little bit more loose, if you will. And so I usually do not use need statements or should statements if I'm working with a client. But I will say, when it comes to safety, I think most people would be okay with using a need statement or a should statement that if you are going to leave or plan to leave your partner, you really want to consider the safety aspects of it all. And so in this video, I'm going to break down 5 key factors that I think are worth considering if you're going to leave your partner. The first thing, you can consider it essentially like your social support system. So identifying key contacts. I've discussed this before. It might be challenging for people to still have a support system, especially if they've been in a long-term abusive relationship. They might not have any more family or friends that are around, right? It just might not be safe for them to still support this person. And so sometimes it can be a challenge to identify key contacts, but it could be family, it could be friends, it could be working professionals. So I've seen a mix of all of them. I think even at times, some abusers, their family knows that they're an abuser. And so it could be the abuser's mom or the abuser's sister that eventually ends up helping the person leave that relationship from their abusive family members. It is one of those things where I don't think you can necessarily say who the person is that you're going to identify as a safe contact, but hopefully it's someone that you trust and it's someone that is not going to share this information with your abuser. Because I have seen that happen where a person's sibling, or like I said, it could be a mom or an aunt, an uncle, they will basically pretend like they are supporting this person leaving the abusive partner, but then they turn around and tell that abuser everything that you shared with them. So, in terms of choosing safe contacts, it is something that, and let me back up when I say this, because a lot of survivors have shared that they can't trust their gut necessarily. So, like, their intuition might not be there. Because for a lot of people, they can trust their gut and kind of go off of a feeling of, I think I can trust this person. Might not have that ability, if you've been through a lot of abuse. And so finding a way to know that they're a trusted person might be a challenge, but that is a part of safety planning, is knowing that the people you're going to share this plan with are safe and that there's really zero to low, low, low chance that they're going to disclose this to the abuser. And again, the reason being, most abusers, when they find out that, their partner is trying to leave them and essentially take away that power and control, it can really escalate the violence. So a lot of times, the recommendation is that if you're going to plan to leave, do this with as few people as possible. It could be, somewhat dangerous to do it alone in isolation, but some people, they don't really have anyone they can trust. And so that might also be where the DV hotline comes in. That number and some other numbers will be included at the end of this video. But it is something that, this is why you can call on DV advocates and we can actually assist with walking you through safety plans. There's a lot of safety plans that you can just Google. If you just Google DV safety plan, you can see a lot of templates that might come up. But even with that, I would caution, do it in a safe manner. If you have a partner that checks your search history or goes through your devices, maybe finding another way to look. But the point is, there's a lot of folks out here that can help. And so that is kind of the step one, is can you find some safe contacts to plan this escape with. Once you have some safe contacts identified, the next thing is packing essentials, discreetly. So some people call it their getaway bag, right? Where they have a bag prepared for when they need to leave. And we'll talk about documentation and other things that are important. But, working with a DV shelter, sometimes families come in and they literally have the clothes on their back, right? And so sometimes they've left essential medications or sometimes they've left different items that they need to live their life in a healthy way. And so these are things to consider, as you're planning to leave your partner. What are some things that are just essential for how you live your life? Like I said, if someone has asthma, do they have an inhaler? Do they have that medication that they need to take daily? Do they have some type of medical device? Or maybe it's even, for your profession, depending on the type of work you do, what do you need to continue to do work if you had to leave everything behind, right? And so this is where it could be challenging because as we're talking about packing essentials, most partners are going to recognize if those essential items are no longer visible, right? If they know you use this certain device or item every day, and then all of a sudden they don't see that item, it might set off some suspicion there. So at times, this is what can delay people leaving is they have to find ways to kind of have those essentials ready and almost have like a duplicate of what you need to survive and have that stowed away in another bag or somewhere else. And something else that I've learned from survivors a lot of times is finding a location to then essentially hide this getaway bag, right? So we talked about having identified a safe contact. Sometimes that's where that person comes into play, where maybe you do pack this essential bag with your items, your clothing. It could be things like underwear, socks, things that you need, right? That could be hard to replace given like a 72-hour period, right? So things that I can get through for a few days or even a week or however long it takes to get to another place of shelter and safety. So sometimes these safe contacts, they can be the person that will hold on to your bag. And sometimes people, I've heard from survivors that they'll have it in their car, right? Where their abuser knows they work out, and so it just looks like a gym bag that's there, but they know what's in that bag, and it's essentially their items that they're going to use once they leave. And so that's just something to think about, and that's the start of this video, right? Talking about foresight and the intentionality behind safety planning and leaving is really taking the time to stop and think, what do I need that if I left it behind, I would regret it, right? And so I will stop here and say folks don't always have the opportunity to pack. Sometimes the opportunity presents itself to leave and folks have to take it. So I don't want to make it sound like if you're not able to plan, thoroughly that you should stay. Not saying that, again, really trying not to use need and should statements, but sometimes people have to leave when they just get a chance and they don't have the opportunity to pack, an essential bag. But it is something that for those that are able to do that, it can make leaving and transitioning into your new level of safety a little easier. Another aspect of safety planning that can be helpful is having, coded language or signals that, maybe this is with that safe contact or your safety network where they know if you send this code word, maybe that means the escape is on, right? I've talked to and worked with a lot of survivors where that is the case, where their friend or whoever their contact knew, hey, if you get this text message and it says this word, it's on. And so sometimes that is the level of secrecy that it can take to leave an abuser. Again, it's something that if they were to see the word, maybe it's hopscotch, they wouldn't necessarily think, okay, this person's talking about escaping. They're words that you know what the meaning are. Your support and your network knows what the meaning are. So that if you share them, it might mean that I made it to the location we talked about. Can you come pick me up so I can go to a safe location? Things like that. Sometimes this is how people get away. They're able to essentially devise these plans where they know that this language means something with this person. And they know that if I ever share this language, that either means maybe it could also mean, hey, destroy whatever items you have because my plan to escape has been found out. That also sometimes happens, and that is also a way that coded language can be helpful. So it is unfortunate, that people have to go through these steps to get away from an abusive partner or an abusive person. But again, when we're talking about power and control dynamics and we're talking about violent individuals, sometimes it's just really, really hard to do that in the open, right? Transparently. There's been so many headlines in the news, unfortunately, about, a person being gunned down at work or a person being unalived in front of their family, in front of their children, even. And when you get into the story or the narrative behind it, turns out this was an abusive relationship and the person disclosed that they were leaving and the abuser essentially, does the ultimate and takes that person's life. So again, finding safe individuals, packing essential items, being able to have coded language, these might seem like steps are an exaggeration or kind of overdoing it, but it just depends on your situation. Some people don't have an abuser that is going to come looking for them or that invades their privacy and goes through their devices, but some people do. So again, just sharing some tips and insights to kind of help if you find yourself in a situation, or maybe you have a friend or a family member that they've opened up to you, like maybe you are that safe contact, right? So again, this is why I'm making this content so that you or those in your life can benefit from this. And if you do like this content, please subscribe. Subscribe to the channel and you will continue to get notified when I post new videos. So I kind of mentioned this earlier, but another aspect of safety planning, number 4 or 5 of this video, is essential documents. So for some, if we're talking about documentation, it could be immigration paperwork, it could be social security cards, it could be birth certificates. A lot of times, survivors are able to get away, but they don't have those documents. And sometimes that's a part of the abuse, right? The abuser hangs on to those things, especially if there's children involved. They might hang on to their passports. I've seen that a lot where abuser knows, hey, as long as I have the passports, you're not leaving the country. So those are the type of items, you can think about where if it's going to take you going to a government office to replace this documentation, maybe it's something you want to have prepared. And again, everyone's situation is different and it might be challenging to have those documents prepared if your abuser has access to them and is holding on to them for that reason. I've seen that. It's pretty common, right? So again, if you are in a position to have those documents, it can make leaving a lot easier, especially as you try to move into a new line of employment, or maybe you want to secure a new housing situation. Sometimes you need those documents in order to do that. Even things as an ID or your driver's license. A lot of times, folks aren't able to leave with those items. And so not that it's impossible, you can get them replaced, but it can add some time to the clock as far as you moving on to your next step. And again, no shame if the person wasn't able to retrieve those items and they had to leave. It's better to leave with your life than to have everything neatly packed and perfect, right? And it is, again, it's a sad situation. A lot of people don't make it out of their relationships. So again, just sharing this to try to help folks move on. And along this, talking point of documentation, something to consider are finances. A lot of times, if there is financial abuse, a person might not have their bank cards, credit cards, debit cards. They might not have those financial tools that they need. And so maybe there's a way you could also prepare for that aspect of it. And it's okay. Some abusers, they do keep their partner in the dark as far as finances go. And so a lot of times, even if a person is the one that was working in a relationship, they might not have any idea about what their bank account number is or where their bank is. Like a lot of times it's really hard to believe that a person could be the sole provider for a family as far as the income, but then have no access to the financial documentation. So both of those are things to consider. What are the finances looking like? What kind of information do you need in order to move on and become independent? But also, what are those government type of documents that are going to be essential to you being able to move forward with your life? And the last item here is just understanding that again, safety becomes more of a priority after a person leaves. I've discussed this, the most dangerous time is once a person has left an abuser. Some people have abusers that they will go look for them. They will, press their family, harass their family. sometimes, unfortunately, they harm family members, right? Because they're really trying to find this person. So again, this is why safety is so important because it can be hard to predict how a person will respond after you leave. And, something that I haven't really been sharing a lot are a lot of the DV statistics that are out there. But one, that we talk about a lot in my circle is that the first time a person leaves is typically not, the final time. A lot of times it could take survivors up to 7 times to leave their abuser before they're gone for good. So it is something that unfortunately for most people, the first time they leave, it's not going to be the final time. They might need to go through that process multiple times. And again, this is where having safe contacts that are willing to go the distance with that person can be helpful. Although it could be scary, right? If you're the best friend of a partner that has an abusive partner historically, it could feel dangerous, right? Because sometimes it is dangerous to be that person. But this is where safety planning comes in. When I mentioned looking at different resources that are online, like I mentioned, a lot of them have safety buttons so you can easily exit out of websites or erase your history. There's a lot of different things that DV, providers and advocates have brought to the world to try to make it a little easier to plan. But all in all, hopefully these 5 points are giving you some insight on what it means to safety plan or what it means to help someone else safety plan. So just really encourage you to think about the future and be, mindful using foresight, trying to think about if it were to happen, what are some things that would be helpful or what steps would have made it more safe, to leave that person. So again, hopefully there's some insight here. Check out the next video and please do use the resources as they come up on the screen. Thank you.